Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Reboot the Root. In this series of teachings, we're going to be looking at the story of Hanukkah. In fact, we're going to be rebooting the story of Hanukkah, giving us an educated understanding of what Hanukkah is through the book of 1st Maccabees. So join me, if you will, as we reboot the root and reboot the story of Hanukkah. Shalom. Shalom, one and all, and welcome back to Reboot the Root, where we're continuing to reboot the story of Hanukkah. This is episode 8, and we're continuing on with the exciting tale of the Maccabees' revolt against the Seleucid Greeks. So last episode, we were talking about the Battle of Beth Horon, led by the commander Seron, and where the Jews, the Maccabee Jews, the rebels, they defeated the forces led by Seron at the Battle of Beth Horon. And so now we are going on to the next battle, and we're also going on to the next set of verses in 1st Maccabees. So we're going to go right now, without any further ado, to 1st Maccabees chapter 3, 27 through 31. And it reads, "Now when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. He opened also his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them. Nevertheless, when he saw that all the money of his treasures failed, and that the tributes in the country were small, because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land, and taken away the laws which had been of old time." So we have this revolution among the Jews that's happening, this great rebellion, and it's really making a drain on the resources of Antiochus Epiphanes, the Seleucid ruler, and so he is becoming very challenged. His resources are being drained and challenged, and so he is starting to see that he is becoming weakened. And so talking about the Maccabees story, the revolt against the Seleucid Greeks, kind of gives us into this mode of thinking about rebellions around the world, or rebellion in general. So in world history, we see that from time to time there rises a need to have a rebellion against the ruling class or the ruling government, or against oppression, or against tyranny, or whatever the situation may be. Our world history is riddled with lots and lots of examples of great rebellions. Subin Nath, he writes, his quote about a revolution says this: "A revolution is a fundamental change in the power or organizational structures that take place over a relatively short period of time." And so that's true for the Hanukkah story as well, as a great rebellion comes to the Jewish people that will bring change, and it really does happen over a very short amount of time. Great rebellions of the world, such as the American Revolution, took place over a relatively short amount of time as well. Revolutions and rebellions are necessary at times to bring about peace and to bring about change and to bring about great changes in the world that God can move in. So looking at some world rebellions, we see that the Soviet Union was one that was created in 1922 by the October Russian Revolution. The United States of America was created by the American Revolution, and rebellion against the British rule that ended in 1783. Between 1911 and 1949, the Chinese Revolution caused the creation of the communist-influenced People's Republic of China. And speaking of rebellions, we cannot forget about the great spiritual Reformation that happened inside the Catholic Church with the Protestant Reformation of 1517 that brought about a revolution to the Catholic Church that established Christian denominations apart from Catholicism. Continuing on with 1 Maccabees chapter 3, 27 through 31, it says, "He feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before." So we're talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. "For he had abounded above the kings that were before him. Wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia, there to take the tributes of the countries and to gather much money." So Antiochus, he is definitely perplexed, but he is desperate. He needs to have more money to fund his troops to continue the fight against the Jewish rebels. Following the defeat at Beth Horon, King Antiochus is disappointed with his continued trouble with the Maccabean rebellion. King Antiochus rethinks and regroups his strategy and resources with the Jewish rebels, and so King Antiochus is unable to financially support his troops and resorts to a campaign to receive tributes from his lands in Persia. So it's a refunding effort that he's doing in Persia. The Seleucid king needs more money to fund his troops and to fund the efforts against the Jewish rebels. King Antiochus ruled over Persia, where he funded his military campaign against the rebellion from the Jews. Talking about this effort that Antiochus Epiphanes is doing in Persia to get more tributes and to get more money, we find that Jack Wellman from Pathos.com writes this: "Modern-day Persia is thought to be the nation of Iran today. In 247 BC, the Parthian Empire, known as the Persian Empire, covered much of the Middle East and Asia Minor, and including the territories where the nations of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, parts of Georgia, Turkey, Iraq, and even parts of Saudi Arabia are located." So this is the area of Persia. It's all encompassing of these different territories. So Mesopotamia, Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, Daniel, Esther, Tower of Babel, and Nimrod are all associated with Persia. So we see Persia evident in the canonized biblical text, where we see that Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar and Darius, Daniel, Esther, the Tower of Babel, Nimrod, and other things are all associated with this area of Persia that Antiochus finds himself going in to get refunded. Now, continuing on with 1 Maccabees chapter 3, 32 through 36, it reads, "So he left Lysias, a nobleman and one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates into the borders of Egypt." So this nobleman, Lysias, he's watching over the kingdom of the Seleucids while Antiochus leaves to go to Persia for his fundraising campaign. And so it continues on and says, he brings up his son Antiochus until he came again. Moreover, he delivered unto him the half of his forces and the elephants, and gave him charge of all things that he would have done, as also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem, to wit, that he should send an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away their memorial from that place, and that he should place strangers in all their quarters and divide their land by lot. So Dr. William Smith, on his article Lysias, out of the Smith's Bible Dictionary, reads this about Lysias. Lysias was entrusted by Antiochus Epiphanes with the government of southern Assyria and the guardianship of his son Antiochus. So he would be Antiochus V. And his son's name is Antiochus Epitor. The instructions for Lysias were to conquer Judea, enslave its inhabitants, utterly destroy Jerusalem, and abolish the whole nation. So in my opinion, Lysias is given the charge to do what Antiochus couldn't do, conquer the Jews. And so Lysias was the Syrian chancellor who reigned from 163 to 161 BC. So this is probably about 4 years after the Maccabee revolt has already started. It's about 4 years into it. According to this article, Wikipedia article entitled Lysias, it reads, Lysias was a Syrian chancellor who reigned 163 to 161 BC. Just like I said before, it's about 4 years approximately into the Maccabee revolt. According to Josephus, the instructions of Lysias were to conquer Judea, enslave its inhabitants, utterly destroy Jerusalem, and abolish the whole nation. So what's happening here is one of two things. Either he's given the charge to continue to do what Antiochus couldn't do, which is squash the Jewish rebellion, or it could mean that while the Jews are out revolting, that his charge is to conquer the remaining people and to submit their will to the Syrian Empire. One of the two things are happening. First Maccabees 3:38 through 40 continues. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Dormenes, Nicanor, and Gorgias, mighty men of the king's friends. And with them he sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah and to destroy it as the king commanded. So they went forth with all their power and came and pitched by Emmaus in the plain country. So we're getting ready for the battle of Emmaus. Ptolemy, Nicanor, and Gorgias considered generals of the Seleucids, and they were also part of the Syrian Greek army of King Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes. These men, Ptolemy, Nicanor, and Gorgias, the generals, the Seleucid generals, they went to battle against Judah, Maccabees, and the Maccabean rebels. And so this encounter is called the Battle of Emmaus, which leads to the cleansing of the temple. So we see the light at the end of the tunnel, the end of the story, so to speak. Emmaus, the Battle of Emmaus, is making way for the Hanukkah story to conclude. And so, looking at where Emmaus is, Emmaus appears to be about 20 miles from Jerusalem, so it's pretty close. Continue on in 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 41 through 44. And the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants, and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria and of the land of Philistines joined themselves unto them. Now when Judas and his brethren saw that the miseries were multiplied, and that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them, they said one to another, let us restore the decayed fortune of our people, and let us fight for our people and the sanctuary. Then was the congregation gathered together, that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. So when you encounter a difficulty in your life, the first thing that you should do is pray. and you should pray to the Lord of heaven that he will have compassion and mercy on you, to give you favor and to give you strength. So the Maccabee revolt is continuing on for the Maccabean forces to get re-excited, if you will, re-excited about how we need to fight for our people, and we need to fight for our sanctuary. So they are re-excited, they are energized, they are encouraged about what this fight is all about. It's about the people. It's about their lifestyle. It's about their identity, and it's about their God and his law. The heart of the Battle of Emmaus is demonstrated in the statements that says from Judas, not Judas Maccabeus, but the people there that are with him. It says, they said one to another, let us restore the decayed fortune of our people, and let us fight for our people in the sanctuary, that they might be ready for battle, and they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. So this is the heart of the Battle of the Emmaus. It is about encouraging themselves about why they are doing this fight, that they're there to fight for the people and to fight for the sanctuary. 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 45. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in and out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and aliens kept the stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. So let's take a look now at the temple at Jerusalem, okay? So this temple that they're fighting for, that was defamed and defiled, this is the second temple period in which Jewish history lasted between 516 and 70, well, 516 BC and 70 AD. So the temple that was destroyed in 70 AD, that was the second temple that had been restored after the Jewish people came out of their 70 years of enslavement in Babylon. So this is the second temple. So they flourished, the people here during this time at the temple in the mid 2nd century. They flourished first under the Persians, which was 539 to 332 BC, and then under the Greeks, which was 332 to 167 BC, then under an independent Hasmonean kingdom, 140 to 37 BC, and then finally under the Romans, 63 BC to 132 BC, or actually 132 AD, sorry. So here's what's happening with the history line here. First, after the time when they are brought back out of their Babylonian captivity, they are under the Persians, okay? Then they're under the Greeks, which identifies the time of the Hanukkah story, the Maccabee revolt. Then, after they acquire their freedom and they're victorious over the Greeks, they have their own type of ruling faction, which is the Hasmoneans. And the Hasmoneans are the ones that the Maccabees belong to. So there's this short time where there's a Jewish ruling dynasty before the Romans come in 63 BC and assert their authority over the Jewish people. And then that takes us all the way up to 132 AD. In 332 BC, the Persians were defeated by Alexander the Great. So 332 BC, when Alexander the Great comes in, opens up the time for the Greeks to bring the Hellenization of the Jews, to bring their culture, their identity into Israel. So this happens in 332 BC with Alexander the Great. After Alexander the Great dies, and his empire is divided among his generals, the Seleucid kingdom was formed. So the ruling power over Israel at this time during the revolt is the Seleucid Greeks. So Seleucid is one of the factions or the kingdoms of the bigger kingdom, which is Greece. And so during this time, currents of Judaism were influenced a lot by Hellenistic philosophy, or they were Greekified, if that's a word. Continue on in 1 Maccabees chapter 3, 45 through 47. It says, "Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and aliens kept the stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe of the harp ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mashpah over against Jerusalem, for in Mashpah was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel." This was a place where they were used to praying. "Then they fasted a day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes." So the Maccabees are preparing to take the temple at Jerusalem. They're getting ready to rededicate the temple in their victory. Continuing on, 48 through 51 of chapter 3 of 1 Maccabees, it says, "And laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images." So here they got the Torah. "They brought also the priest's garments and the first fruits and their tithes, and the Nazarites they stirred up who had accomplished their days. Then cried with a loud voice towards heaven, saying, What shall we do with these, and whither shall we carry them away? For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profaned, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low." So what's happening here in this set of verses is that they are getting ready to take over the temple. So what it looks like is happening here is there are those who had a Nazarite vow, probably setting themselves apart in prayer and dedication for the sake of the temple, is what I think is going on here. And so what they're doing to prepare to take the temple back is they're bringing out the Torah. It says right here, the book of the law, that's the Torah. And they bring it out the priest's garments. They're bringing out the first fruits and the tithes. They're getting ready for what is going to happen. They're going to take back the temple, and they're going to rededicate it, and they're going to cleanse it. So we see what had happened when the pagans moved in at the beginning of this whole Hanukkah story, this whole Maccabee revolt, that the temple is defiled, it is violated. Jerusalem and the temple at Jerusalem were under siege and the control of the Seleucid Greeks. The invaders are considered aliens or Gentiles. So if you've ever done a little story about who Gentiles are, Gentiles is anyone who is not Israelites. Non-Israelites are the Gentiles. They are the invaders. They are the aliens. Israelites are robbed of their joy because their temple is violated. It says that in this verse. For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profaned. And they put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads. So this is speaking of a time of mourning and sadness. Looking to what's going on here, we get some further information from gotquestions.org. And they say sackcloth and ashes were used in Old Testament times as a symbol of debasement, mourning, and of repentance. When someone died, the act of putting on sackcloth showed heartfelt sorrow for the loss of that person. So that's what they're doing, is they're showing that they have sorrow for what's happened at the temple. And then also going back and highlighting what we just read out of 1 Maccabees 3:48 through 51, it says, this particular verse, and laid upon the book of the law, they brought also the priest's garments and the first fruits and the tithes and the Nazarites that stirred up. What's happening here is the Israelites are preparing to take back the temple. The Israelites are preparing to retake their identity. So in 2 Maccabees 6, it says this about that the heart of the Jew is broke. It reads this: and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympus, and that in Gerizim of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people. For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar was also filled with profane things which the law of the Torah forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So the heart of the Jew is broke, while the temple in Jerusalem, the temple of God, is dedicated to Greek gods. It has become a Greek temple, honoring a Greek god. It has been polluted by the ways of the heathen, which included the sacrifice of pig. The law of God was defiled and blasphemed. The altar and the Sabbath day was profane. The Jewish identity was prohibited, and the heart of the Jew was broken by the doctrines of man. So this is probably a good place to stop on this episode, episode 8 of Rebooting Hanukkah. So I hope you've enjoyed this history lesson as we've gone down the road of history and seen what was going on with the rebellion of the Jews against the Seleucid Greeks. We're now at a point where we're starting to see the victory of the Jews over the Greeks. And we're gonna, next episode, we're gonna continue to see how they repel the invaders and we take back the temple. So you don't want to miss episode 9, when we'll continue on rebooting Hanukkah. So for now, I'll say shalom, and we'll come on back to the reboot. Shalom.